Hello and welcome to Combat COVID-19 Community Support. Thank you so much for joining us this lovely afternoon. We have a fabulous guest speaker. Dr. Mary Meador is going to be talking to us about the science of neurobiology and connecting our mind and our health. But before we get started, just a little bit about who we are. So Combat COVID-19 is really an informal coalition of healthcare providers and other community leaders who are really coming together to produce a series of live stream events to support you and your family during the pandemic. And we are funded by the Central Oregon Health Council. We do have to really quickly go over a disclaimer so that you know that this event is provided for educational purposes only. It should not be used as medical advice or medical opinions. If you do have a medical or mental health concern, please contact your healthcare provider. And with that, I did want to tell you that Dr. Meador has agreed to take questions and comments from the audience. And so if you're joining us on Facebook or YouTube Live, please feel free to type your comments in and questions, and we will definitely get to those at the end. And so without any more delays, I'm really excited to introduce Dr. Mary Meador, and I'm actually going to let her tell you a little bit about herself and her background before she gets started today.
Hi, everybody. Welcome, and thank you so much for coming here, or not coming here, I guess, as the case may be, is what we're all trying to do, is not go places, but we are so lucky to have the technology and to have the Central Oregon Health Council sponsoring this, to have Dawn bringing all of this forward for you. So take a deep breath, everybody. I want to talk to you today about the importance of stress during this time of COVID-19. I can't imagine that there's any of you that aren't experiencing or feeling stress. And and I think it's important, it's helpful to understand stress and anxiety a little bit more, what that means in our bodies. And I also, tied in with all of this, is the importance of connection. So, understanding the importance of relationships and connection and how that's folded into stress and anxiety, I think can be really helpful at all times, and especially right now. Before I start with that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me and my background. So I'm a family physician and have been for a long time. Before I started the current practice that I have now, which is I specialize in mental and behavioral health and sort of medical consultation. But before I did that, I practiced primary care for a long time. I practiced in an emergency room for a couple of years, actually up in Madras. And as I walked through my practice in medicine, I was really, really aware of this tension between what was going on with the person in front of me, whether it was diabetes or a broken arm or whatever, and how I had been so trained to understand the diabetes or understand the broken arm or the hypertension or whatever. And I hadn't really been trained to connect with and really understand what the patient, what the person was experiencing. And that just became so I don't know, so pronounced for me, the way that our healthcare system is, and we kind of shuffle people in and shuffle people out. I know for sure I am not alone in having this observation, but I really thought, you know what, I kind of want to understand this some more, and I want to do something about it. So I began to actually, instead of focusing and ignoring that or compartmentalizing that, I began to focus more on mental health and more on behavioral health, and really trying to understand how we are, well, frankly, how physical and emotional health are completely indivisible. And I really began to think about, we are here I am. I have one brain, and I have a nervous system that runs throughout my body. And it's the same nervous system that feels stress, that feels joy, that operates my heart, that makes me breathe and keeps my lungs going, that makes my tummy rumble because it's noon and I haven't had lunch. I haven't had lunch yet. So there is no difference between the nervous system that conducts energy and information along its pathways. There's no difference between the physical health and the emotional health within that nervous system. That, if that makes sense. Anyway, that became fascinating to me, and I decided to study that more. And so for the last 12 years or so, that's kind of what I've been doing, and um, how I've been spending my time. And I think it just has become more more and more fascinating in the last 10 or 20 years. We know so much more about the brain. And the really, really interesting thing that I found out in doing my studies is that we are, as you can see on the first slide, we are social animals, and we cannot survive without connection to others. Literally, we cannot. There have been sad examples of children in orphanages, of animals that are isolated, and they do not survive without connection. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about that and help you guys see. So I let's see. Okay, so I'm excuse me. This is a technological pause. I'm trying to figure out. So I'm going to advance the slides, and then my oh, there we go. Okay, that's how it goes without a hitch. So I want to go back to the very beginning, and I want to tell you about how this idea of us being social animals, and that it's wired into our system. And in fact, if you go back, if you look at this very abbreviated slide of showing evolution, you see in the upper left-hand corner, we started as one-celled organisms that gradually the cells began to group together. The cells began to become different types of cells, and that's what gave rise to animals. And those cells became specialized. Some of these cells became specialized in trying to help the organism, the animal, survive. And what that means is they would those cells became specialized in identifying things that were good, and they would approach them, and they became specialized in understanding what things were bad, and they would avoid them and move away. And those groups of cells, we call them the nervous system. And if you think about how complex our brains and our nervous system is, it's hard to imagine, but it really did. The whole purpose of our nervous system is to help me go to the apple tree, pick an apple, and be able to eat it, to remember where the apple tree was the next time I'm hungry and I need to go get an apple, and to be able to recognize that if I walk this way, I go past the cave with the saber-toothed tiger in it, so I better not do that. I better walk the other way. That's the whole purpose of the nervous system, is to help me to survive. And as we animals evolved, the other thing that happened, at first, it was all about me. But over time, it became something that if we figured out that if we worked together, our nervous systems, we could more effectively find more apple trees. Uh, I could guard against the saber-toothed tiger while you went and picked apples. So we learned to cooperate in groups. And that wasn't just like someone sitting around going, that's a good idea. I'll go down to the other cave and see if Billy Bob wants to come help me pick apples. It doesn't work. Evolution, it's a slow process. And it turns out that people I mean, this is going back before people, but anyway, animals who liked being around each other survived better. And like isn't the best word for it, but it works okay. So it literally became wired into our system that it was better for me if I hung out in groups than if I was by myself. And that wiring resulted in, if I'm not in the group, I'm more anxious. And when I'm with the group, I feel safe, I feel secure, I'm going to stay here. I leave the group, I feel anxious. I come back, I feel safe. So we'll talk about that more in a little bit, but just we'll just think about that for a second. That we were literally wired to be with groups. So here's don't worry about the detail. Oh, on this slide. Don't worry about the details on the slide of the brain, but it's a picture of a brain with lots of different parts in it. And what I want to point out that that the brain, you're right, I've got a brain in my skull and I've got this nervous system that extends throughout my body. And it works very hard, and it works most of the time, works pretty well to help, like I said, regulate my heartbeat, keep me breathing, tell me when I'm hungry, etc. But it's not just a part of me. It also becomes a part of the other brains around me. So it is how I talk about it is that it is literally a social organ. And what I talked about just a second ago when we were talking about evolution, it's a social organ that is built on experience, and that's primarily experience with relationships. So my experience of being in relationships with this group, with my tribe, is that's where I'm safe. That's how I'm going to find the apple trees. That's how I'm going to avoid the saber-toothed tigers. And if I get in trouble, if I whatever, if I do something that the group decides they don't want me to be in the group anymore and they kick me out, I'm going to feel anxious about that. So again, that's a wiring thing. Let's see, where do I want to go from here? So that's a wiring thing. So here we are. Oh, I know where I want to go. So when we are born, when we're these little babies that get born, we are looking for connection. And any of you who've either have children, who work with kids, have been around kids, you see how hard those little babies work to get us to bond with them. And it's about eye contact. It's about just the softness of their skin and the ways that we are just find them irresistible. We're wired to bond with them, and they are wired to help that bond be like super glue. They are so dependent on us, those babies, that literally their survival depends on that bonding. So what happens then is that people people um, have those strong and powerful connections with their children, and the relationship that we have in our primary family group becomes a part of how we look at the world. If we have a safe attachment in our family, a secure attachment in our family, we feel safe being in the world, and relationships feel safe to us. Unfortunately, as we all know, and some of us personally experience, being growing up in a household is not necessarily safe, is not necessarily bring security. But there you can see where the source of anxiety might come from. So here I am, this little baby grows up to be growing into a little girl, and I am always longing for safety, longing for security, and longing for connection. That is universal for all of us. And when I don't feel safe, when I don't have connection, I get anxious. I'm going to go to the next slide. There's a part of our brain that's in the very in a lower primitive part of our brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala is the seat of fear and the seat of anxiety. And that's the part of our brain that is completely wired for safety and danger. So 24/7, is it safe? Is it dangerous? That's the part of our brain that's really looking for that. And and our and if we don't feel safe and secure, that part of our brain can hijack the thinking rational part of my brain into feeling overwhelmed and very insecure. So the amygdala it says here, the amygdala can hijack the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the part of my brain, sits behind my forehead, that has the authority most of the time to keep me calm, to keep me connected, to help me do the tasks I need to do. But when I get scared, the amygdala can hijack the prefrontal cortex. And so I think that is something that's going on right now. There is so much insecurity, uncertainty about what's happening. We've lost our normal way of life. We've lost so many things. Um, and some people have been very, very, very sick. Some people have died through all of this, and that has created a lot of uncertainty, and stress and anxiety. So, what I want to fold that back, um, into what we were talking about before. We've seen how our brains are wired for connection. We feel anxious and insecure and stressed if we don't have connection, if we don't and we don't feel safe. So during this time of COVID-19, where we are isolated relative to what we were, it's really, really important, and we'll talk about this in a second, that we continue to try to find connection. But I just want, I want during this little talk that I'm doing to try to help you understand that the stress and the anxiety that you feel is completely normal for you to be feeling it, and to recognize that's it's an evolutionary thing, and that part of what we need to do is try to do things with our this upper part of our brain, our prefrontal cortex, to help down regulate some of the stress and the anxiety that we feel. So, looking at the next slide, we can see that there are a lot of different ways that we cope with stress and anxiety. I'm going to say right away, the all the list on the left are the good things to cope with, but we use the list on the right to cope also. We're trying to find ways to help us feel better. And I want to try to encourage all of you to use the list on the left. So I want to encourage us to exercise, to meditate, to have connecting conversations with a friend or a partner, to read some good books, some articles, watch TV, watch a movie, do some things you haven't done in a while, maybe paint or draw, journal, do some creative writing. Um, and I want to encourage you to stay away from the alcohol, the drugs, recognizing anger, impatience, depression are all a result of this stress and anxiety that we're experiencing. And I want you to think about, something I say sometimes to myself or others is those feelings that I'm having, those thoughts that I'm having, they're just the activity of my mind. I'm feeling stressed right now. So of course I would be feeling a little more impatient, or I'm so sorry, I just got really angry, and that's a result of this stress and this anxiety that I'm feeling. And I want to let I want to acknowledge that I'm going to have those thoughts, I'm going to have those feelings, but I don't want to let them define me. I don't want to let them be my identity. I want to remember, okay, I was impatient. Okay, I got angry. Oh, I'm feeling anxious. Here are some things I can do about it. Exercise, meditation, call a friend, read, go find a happy place that I can be. Um, let's talk about some things, elaborating things that you can do right now. Um, I want, and this is, we'll fold back a little bit on some of the things that I've already said, but remind yourself that stress reactions right now, always, but especially right now, are completely normal, very, very common. We need to stay connected. We have to get creative how we do it, but we need to stay connected. Even writing letters is a great and fun thing to do right now. And we need to maintain those social networks. I mean, I've certainly called up people that I haven't talked to in years, just as a way to reach out. And it feels really good. Um, Limit your media exposure. If it's anxiety provoking to you, which it should be, to be watching the news or listening to, whatever all day, don't do it. Because as long as you're stimulating that stress and that anxiety, it's going to get it's going to feel bigger and bigger and bigger. So once or twice a day to check in on the news and make sure that, check in with what's happening is plenty. Um, Keep things in perspective. We are doing so well here in Central Oregon. People have just been amazing in how they have, as the tagline, stay at home, save lives, has really made a huge difference. The leadership at the hospital and in the medical community is doing such a good job. They are really leading, they're listening to the science, and they're really trying to help us figure out how to navigate through this so that we can live to play another day in Central Oregon. I mean, that's the tagline now of Bend whatever the Bend Travel, the Bend Tourism Department. Their tagline is "Live to play another day in Central Oregon." So they aren't encouraging tourism. And really think about taking care of yourself. What can you do right now? You can stick to your routines. You need rest. You need healthy food. You need exercise. And those things are really important for you in terms of taking care of yourself. As I talked about a little bit before, drugs and alcohol, they are absolutely, we use those because we don't like the way we're feeling right now. So we try to change the way we're feeling. And there might be some short-term relief, but it can absolutely lead to long-term consequences of anxiety or depression. Using nicotine, using caffeine, those both directly stimulate anxiety. Using alcohol is absolutely a depressant. You might feel better in the moment or for a little bit, but it will cumulatively lead to depression. People are talking with me a lot about feeling very overwhelmed. So pause, take some breaths, and address one problem at a time. I think if there's anything that we can valuable that we can learn from what's going on right now, there's lots of valuable things we can learn. But one of them is the negative impact that our busy, busy lives have on us. And I think that what I've certainly noticed, and I've talked about with other people too, is that we really, I don't know, the way I kind of describe it is our society, our culture kind of, we become human doings instead of human beings. And the truth is, we are human beings. We are supposed to be a lot more than what we actually do, because we focus so much on the doing. And all of that doing is a part of dealing with stress and anxiety, quite frankly. But that's going off on a different tangent. So finding the time to slow down is not a bad thing for any of us. And if you are feeling overwhelmed, break tasks into smaller, more manageable steps. The other thing that I want to mention is really be willing to ask for help. That might be help at home, that might be help with a partner at work, a team member at work if you're still working in the house or outside of the house. And and as important is, if you are feeling overwhelmed with emotions, with anxiety, with depression, please, please, please reach out to a mental health provider. There are a lot of professional people that are out here right now that will be very happy to help you, navigate some of this. It's very hard. We can do this together. We have to stick together. We are wired to stick together. And at this point, we need to, listen to the science. At the same time, be willing to think outside the box to figure out how to help us keep connected. And just remember that we are going to get through this. We really are. So, Dawn, are there any comments or questions, or do you have any thoughts?
Well, first, Dr. Meador, thank you so much for that really helpful information. We've had a number of guest speakers that have kind of talked about ways to deal with stress and anxiety during COVID, but you actually explaining the biological reasoning behind it and the evolutionary reasoning behind it, I thought was really interesting. We so far do not have any questions from our live viewers, but they do still have a chance to type some in. So please ask any questions for Dr. Meador. But a couple things that came to my mind when you were early talking on about the connection with social beings and how evolutionarily the animals that learn to work together with other beings and that connection actually had a better chance of survival, and then that got sort of coded and wired into our bodies. And you were saying that when they're away from their social connection, that produces anxiety. And I actually was wondering if that can go across um, different types of animals. So, for example, my dogs, I actually find that when I am with my dogs, I am so much more calmer and at
Oh.
peace. And when I am actually away from them, whether I'm just like going, on a vacation even or to the grocery store, I find myself just not liking to be away from my dogs. So, is that kind of why that happens?
Absolutely. Matt, if you want to put the slide view back on, you can see this example here, which is this lovely. I think they're all really cute pictures, but this cute little picture of the duck and the goat that are together. They are bonded. You and your dogs, Dawn, are bonded, and your dogs might feel anxious when you go away, as do you when you're away from them. I can completely relate to that. And there's so many wonderful studies and stories that show how what a positive effect and influence animals can have on us. And I think I'm so glad you asked that and talked about that, because there are times, maybe because we have to be by ourselves, excuse me, um, that the connection that is available to us right now is our dog or our cat or our bunny rabbit. Um, so absolutely, that is a wiring thing, and dogs are particularly. I mean, that's how dogs. Um, Domestic dogs, not wolves or coyotes, but domestic dogs evolved because those ones that were more willing to come close to the campfire and get a scrap of, gazelle or whatever was being eaten that night. um, they survived, and if that and then it turned out it made the people happy. So it all it's a beautiful story, the dog story.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that, because that makes me feel less of like just a sap and understand that there's actual biological reasons for that. I was thinking I was just codependent on my dogs, which I still might be. So I did have one more question for you, which is, something that really resonated with me when you were talking is this, that we are human beings, not human doings. And I actually feel like with a lot of our guest speakers, we've actually gotten a little bit of conflicting information on that. A lot of the speakers have said a lot of the things that you did about strategies to cope, right? Um, but a lot of them are like, some of our guest speakers have said, dig in and do that garage project, dig in and do things, projects that you never thought you'd be able to do. And I feel like there's a little bit of a tension there between, we do need to slow down and be versus always do. And so I don't know if you had any other thoughts about that, because there does
Oh,
seem to be
sure.
a little bit of conflicting advice on that.
Yeah. No, I'm so glad you brought that up. Um, I here's my go-to on answering a question like that. It is all about finding balance. So I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of people in this last month, who are trying to figure out how to navigate this very, very different time. And the garage is a good example. I've talked to many people who have said, some people have come like, oh my gosh, my garage, it's never looked so good. And I feel so good about that. And it energized me. And I slept better that night. And to that person and to those people, I say, you go for it. Get your garage cleaned up. There is an opportune time right now to do something like that. And then also talk to the people who feel so guilty and so bad about themselves because they don't want to do their garage. They should do their garage, but they don't want to. And so that, I think, is an opportunity to really kind of dig a little bit deeper into some of the conflict, some of the resistance. So we are complicated beings, and it's not black or white. It's not like, okay, do the garage. It's more complicated than that. And I think the most important thing right now is for us to learn, in that learning to be, in that taking some time to pause. I taught. I meant to mention this and I hadn't. I talked all about connection with other people. Right now is an amazing time to have a better connection with yourself, to get to know yourself a little bit more, to try to understand some and be aware of some of those feelings, some of that discomfort that you feel, the pull, the push, the shoulds, the want tos. Um, there's meaning in that. And all of that, so much of that energy and information comes from below the level of our awareness. And in the only way to figure it out, why am I not doing the garage? Or why did I do this bathroom, but I don't want to do that. I don't know. I don't know what but this is a time, the only way that we can really understand ourselves is to stop and pay attention and be present and really notice, what am I feeling? That's why I think journaling is such a great idea and opportunity for really kind of getting to know what lives inside of me more. And I also, this popped into my head when you were asking the question. I realized that part of what I had said I was going to talk about was about the connection between mental health and physical health. And so to, just very quickly to say that when we're under a lot of stress, when we're feeling a lot of anxiety, when our mental health is not optimal, it absolutely impacts our physical health too. So there is an important balance and dance, and it we really need to pay attention both to our emotional self and our physical self, because we need both of them to survive and to thrive.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Meador. I'm going to check in with our production studio, Matt at Hand in Hand Productions. Matt, do you have any questions for Dr. Meador?
I just have one, and that would be obviously you talked about the amygdala responding. And do you have any tips? I mean, I think you've done some good job, but I mean, are there any direct tips to sort of calm that in those moments? I mean, how do we? Because I know that a lot of that is a very triggered response. But what one or two things would you give us to just be like, okay, it's okay, and you just need to know that it's your amygdala responding at that point in time.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. That's a really good question. So here's two go-to things. Um, the first one I'll start with is that is the most simple, and the answers are both connected, but that is your breath. We always have our breath with us, and we can use it to help us down regulate the activity of the amygdala. So taking a deep breath, and you will notice that when you are anxious, when you're stressed, when that area of your brain is activated, you're going to be breathing more shallowly, and more quickly. So taking control of your breath not only physiologically is helpful, and I'll explain that in a second, but it also just brings to awareness, oh, I'm feeling kind of anxious right now. And I'm going to slow things down with this deeper breath. And I also want to teach you that if you inhale, let's say to a count of 4, and then you exhale to a count of 8. So we're gonna all do this together. Let's go. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale 2, 3, 4. Exhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And what you're doing with that extra exhale is you're pushing down on your diaphragm, and that activates a particular nerve in your body that is interested in calming and slowing things down. So that's a specific, so just even being aware of your breath, taking a deep breath, but specifically inhaling and then exhaling longer than you're inhaling. And you do that 4 or 5 times, and it literally is very calming. The next thing that studies show are absolutely very, very helpful with calming stress and anxiety is meditation. And a meditation practice, there's so many different apps out there right now that can teach you, or YouTube videos that can teach you how to meditate. Two of my favorites are Calm, Calm, and Headspace. um, and both of those have versions that you can use for free. So what meditation does in is it's basically teaching you to follow your breath, to have your attention. I mean, meditation could be a lot of different things, but here's the way I'm going to talk about it is it's going to help. It's going to teach you to literally focus your attention on the inhale and the exhale, and just follow your breath as if you were playing follow the leader, and you're just following the inhale and then following the exhale. And you do that, and what that does is it requires you to use this part of your brain to follow your breath. And if you're focused on using this part of your brain, it's like exercising your brain. It's like taking your brain to the gym. So you go to the gym when we used to be able to go to gyms. You go to the gym because you want to get stronger. You don't go to the gym because you necessarily even like being there. I mean, I guess some people do, but you go there so that you can, it's more easy to carry the groceries out of, or it's more easy to lift your kids, or it's more easy to go for a longer mountain bike ride or something. That's why you go to the gym. So the meditation you're doing is because you're exercising this part of your brain. And this is the part of your brain that literally has the authority to down regulate the amygdala. There's a neurotransmitter that it secretes that down regulates the activity of the amygdala. And the more you can practice the meditation, the more the stronger that part of your brain comes, and the more easily I can connect to it when I get anxious to down regulate that. And there are some really good studies, literally, that show that the people who meditate regularly, that it's this part of their brain is thicker. It's more able to function and do all of these things. This part of our brain is also the part of our brain that that knows how to create connection and relationship. So, without going on too much longer, because most of these things I can talk for a really long time, about. But the point is, Matt, with your question, so meditating, it doesn't have to be a big deal. It can be 10 or 12 minutes a day. You can learn those skills connecting with your breath, and it can really make a difference.
Thank you. That was actually the breath thing for me is always, I think that's a good reminder, because it's always, I think in those moments we forget, oh yeah, hey, if I breathe, I'm going to be okay.
Right,
So
right,
I
right,
appreciate that reminder
right.
very much. Yeah, thank
Of
you.
course, of
Yeah,
course.
I think that was really helpful, Dr. Meador, because I know you always hear breathe or meditate, but I never really understood the mechanism, how that works in our body. And so, actually, you explaining that I think is really helpful for maybe
Okay.
people who are like, "Oh, that's a bunch of pansy stuff,"
Yeah,
right? But
yeah,
there's an
yeah.
actual physiological reason why those things help. So, thank you so much for explaining all that and all that really wonderful information. We do have a couple comments from some of our audience viewers. Linda said, fabulous speaker. Thank you. Thank you. And Gail said, wonderful information. Thank you. With that, I do want to thank all of our viewers, those of you who are watching us live, or if you're watching this recorded, please visit our Facebook page to see the schedule of weekly live events. We have a great schedule of live events next week, 4 different live events. So please go to our Facebook page. You can also watch the live events on YouTube or on Facebook. All of them are recorded and available to watch anytime. So feel free to view those or share with people that you think would be interested in this information. And with that, thank you and have a wonderful afternoon.